So tonight I was watching the original version of Inherit the Wind, which is based on the Scopes monkey trial from the 1920s. Now, anybody who knows anything about American history, anybody who knows anything about Inherit the Wind or the Scopes monkey trial, knows that the Inherit the Wind play and movie were propaganda pieces that were completely historically inaccurate. Yet, of course, these are shown in public schools as if they're accurate. For example, John Scopes was a math teacher, not a science teacher. He taught math, and he was a football coach, and he substitute taught biology for about 2 weeks. And during that time, he never actually taught evolution. But this was something that both lawyers agreed to keep that detail under wraps, and students were coached by the lawyers to claim that Scopes had taught evolution. Some other pieces of misinformation from the movie: Scopes was never put in jail, and so you kind of get the idea that the entire movie, the entire play, is a complete misrepresentation of history. It's a complete fabrication. It's nothing like what actually happened at the Scopes monkey trial. But for this video, I didn't really want to focus so much on the historical inaccuracies. I wanted to focus on the fact that when we watch this movie, there's a very interesting overall theme to it. And there was a very interesting overall theme historically to the actual Scopes monkey trial. And there's a painful, painful irony when you watch this movie in 2017, when you watch this movie in the 21st century. There's a very, very painful irony. I mean, we're going on the better part of a century after the actual Scopes monkey trial. And there's some interesting political points that are very much reversed in our day and age. For example, both lawyers in the actual Scopes monkey trial wanted both creation and evolution to be taught in schools. Now, obviously, modern creationists, when you look at people like Answers in Genesis and organizations like that, their goal isn't to get creation into public schools. The reason being, if creation were taught alongside evolution in public schools, creation would be grossly misrepresented. And in reality, creation is taught alongside evolution, but students are taught a straw man view of creation. Students are lied to. Students are told, well, creationists deny that species change. Creationists teach the fixity of species. Creationists deny science. So they're told all these falsehoods about creationists. So if they were told to talk about creationists more, they would only be teaching more falsehoods. But anyway, back to the movie and the trial. When I was watching the movie, I thought there were a few particularly interesting scenes. During the movie, the lawyer for John Scopes, yes, I know they changed the names in the movies and for the play, but we all know who this is supposed to represent. The lawyer for John Scopes from the ACLU in the movie argues that this man should have the right to think. He should have the right to freedom of thought. And there being laws against teaching that humans arose from lower life forms, like, well, you're only allowed to teach the creation view, you're only allowed to teach the biblical view, why can't you teach any views that are contrary to that? And he was arguing against censorship. He was arguing against censorship. He was arguing against having it where the government decides this is what's truth, this is what is acceptable thought, and you're not allowed to question it. Now, obviously, we do want to have it where when we go to school, there's certain ideas that are taught as per the standard curriculum. However, when these ideas get to a point where we're not allowed to question them, we're not allowed to pick them apart, we're not allowed to have critical thinking about these ideas, as is the case with evolution in this day and age, then it no longer becomes science. At that point, it becomes dogma. So people will compare evolution to gravity. And they'll say, you deny evolution? You question evolution? That's like questioning gravity. And it's like, well, look, I can observe gravity. Some will argue we can observe evolution. I'm actually going to make a video talking just about evolution and gravity at some point. But we can observe that species change. That's something that both creationists and evolutionists agree upon. But we disagree that these changes can lead a single-celled organism to becoming a human over the course of billions of years. Now, I'm getting kind of off track here. With gravity, we can debate the mechanisms of gravity. Somebody can come into a physics class and say, well, I don't agree with this particular view of gravity. I don't agree with this particular idea of what happens when a pen is dropped, which is something that we can readily observe. Whereas you cannot observe a single-celled organism becoming human. And the person going in and challenging thoughts on gravity, challenging theories of gravity, is perfectly fine. A teacher can readily get up in front of the students and say, well, I don't think that this is how gravity works, I think it works this way. But gravity is something we can observe. We can directly observe this pen falling. We cannot observe something like a bacterium becoming a human over the course of billions of years. It is outside of what we can directly observe. However strong you think that inference is, it's not something we can directly observe. And like I said, I plan to talk about this more in a future video. However, I'm getting off topic, which I tend to do. It was interesting that the lawyer in favor of evolution was saying, if you censor teachers in public schools, and you have laws doing this, you have laws saying, well, teachers aren't allowed to talk about evolution, they're not allowed to talk about particular ideas that some people may find offensive, then how long is it going to be before you have laws censoring the private schools? How long is it going to be before you have laws censoring books from public discussion? And this is interesting because there was a lot of irony here. They even went so far as, hey, what if you end up having laws demanding that only Darwinism be taught in schools and creation being censored? And of course, anybody who watches that sort of thing today has got to see the sense of irony. They've got to see that, hey, there's a strong irony here. Because in our day and age, of course, in public schools, if a teacher even talks about creation in any positive manner whatsoever, if they even mention the fact that, hey, there are scientists who are creationists, there are scientists who are in favor of intelligent design, they risk being fired. They risk losing their career. And we live in a day and age where scientists, if they talk about creation, if they talk about intelligent design, they are getting fired. This is happening on a regular basis, where scientists come out and say, you know what, I think intelligent design is a valid position. I think it's a likely position. Or I think creation is a valid position. We regularly see scientists being persecuted for this. For example, there was a scientist from the Smithsonian, 2 PhDs in evolutionary biology. 2 PhDs in evolutionary biology. He's not an intelligent design advocate. As far as I know, he still isn't. He allowed peer review and publication of an article that was pro-intelligent design, and he basically ended up sacrificing his career in the process. Now, some evolutionists, some Darwinists will get online and say, oh, well, nothing happened to him. He wasn't actually a paid employee. They'll come up with all these weird excuses. However, there were 2 federal investigations that found that his civil rights were violated. And that's something that when you hear pro-Darwin, when you read pro-Darwin articles, they don't generally mention that. But anyway, I think my point with all of this is that we live in a world where it's such a painful irony. The Scopes stereotype has been turned on its head. And no, I'm not the first person to quote that, to come up with that phrase. Others have said that. But you even have it where you're seeing legislation in the UK where they're trying to prevent private Christian schools from being allowed to talk about creation. Now, I find that very interesting. It's like we live in a world where more and more and more there's this push to censor anybody who disagrees with evolution, even highly qualified scientists. And when I say highly qualified scientists, I mean people like Dr. John Sanford of Cornell University. This is the man who invented the gene gun and revolutionized agriculture, revolutionized biotechnology, revolutionized genetic engineering. Without him, we'd have a lot of difficulty doing what we do today. Now, granted, perhaps somebody else would have come along and invented the gene gun later on. However, just as you could say for any scientific discovery, if Newton hadn't come along, maybe somebody else would have, within 10 years. Who knows? We don't have a crystal ball to find that out. However, we do credit, this is one of the greatest scientists on the planet. And yet you have, pardon me, I'm going to say this, and I'm going to be frank with it. We have idiot trolls on YouTube coming to my channel saying, oh, Dr. John Sanford's not a real scientist. And it's like, this is a PhD geneticist who taught at Cornell. He invented the gene gun. If he's not a real scientist, then nobody is. The only reason you're saying he's not a real scientist is because he doesn't agree with your ill-informed ideas. Or Dr. Raymond Damadian, who invented the MRI. He of course faced discrimination as well. But I guess a lot of this is stuff I've said before. But it just struck me as a huge irony that if you watch Inherit the Wind, which is not historically accurate by any means, it's a complete misrepresentation of what happened. Almost everything in the movie is the opposite of what actually happened. Or if you study the actual Scopes trial, there's this call for academic freedom. There's this call for teachers to be able to honestly discuss controversial ideas with their students. There's this call for scientists. Actually, there wasn't in this case because at least in the movie, there's no call for scientists to have freedom because it doesn't seem that there was a need to, the way there is today. But overall, you see this call for academic freedom, and today you see such a reverse that any scientist who dares disagree with certain ideology loses their job. Unless they're very, very lucky and they happen to be in a more tolerant institution. So, that's pretty much what I had to say about that. Feel free to leave your comments. Feel free to subscribe. Feel free to rate. And please share this video because I do have it where I can take donations on my website, on the main, on greenslug.com. But I would much prefer it if you shared this video with your friends, because as these videos get around, as these ideas spread, more people can change their way of thinking, and more people have the opportunity to in turn share this video with their friends, and so on. So, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for watching this video. This is Greg, out.